The day my son-in-law walked into my house with a briefcase and a stranger in a suit, I already knew. I'd been waiting for that moment for almost 2 years. Let me back up. My name is Eugene Calloway, and I'm 61 years old. I spent 34 years working as a site supervisor for a construction company out of Sudbury, Ontario. I'm not a complicated man. I like my morning coffee black, I like hockey, and I like the house I built with my own 2 hands on Ramsey Lake Road. 3 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, and a wood stove in the living room that kept us warm through winters that would make most people weep. I built that house when I was 32, the year after my daughter Madeleine was born. My wife, Patricia, used to say it wasn't just a house. It was the best thing I'd ever made with these hands. She passed away 6 years ago, ovarian cancer, 11 months from diagnosis to the end. I still think about her every single morning when I pour that first cup of coffee. After Patricia died, it was just me and Madeleine. She was 25 at the time, living in Toronto, working for an environmental nonprofit. We talked every Sunday. She'd come home for Christmas and Thanksgiving, and sometimes just a random weekend in March when the city got to be too much. We were close. Not in a way that needed to be said out loud, just close in the way that matters. Then she met Slade. Slade Mercer. Even the name should have told me something. She brought him home for the first time in the spring. 2.5 years ago now. He showed up in a leased BMW that he mentioned 3 times in the first hour, wearing a button-down shirt that was too crisp for a casual dinner, and he had this way of looking around the house when he thought no one was watching. Not admiring it, appraising it. I noticed that right away. Over dinner, about 40 minutes in, he asked me how long I'd had the property. Not the house. The property, I said, going on 30 years. He nodded slowly, the way someone does when they're filing information away. Then he asked, almost as an aside, "And you're planning to stay here through retirement? Or have you thought about downsizing?" I looked at him across the table. Madeleine was bringing salad in from the kitchen. I said, "I haven't thought about it at all." He smiled. Smart. Real estate up here is only going one direction. Patricia would have kicked me under the table for what I was thinking right then. I didn't say anything to Madeleine that night. She was happy. The happiest I'd seen her since before her mother got sick. And I wasn't going to be the one to put a shadow over that. But I called my old friend Barry the next morning. Barry had worked in property law in Sudbury for 30 years before retiring, and we'd been friends since our kids were in the same hockey league. I told him about Slade, about the question, about the way he'd looked around the room. Barry was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Eugene, you sure?" I said, "I'm sure of what I saw," he said. "Then let me ask you something. How bad is it if you're wrong?" I told him it wasn't bad at all. Worst case, my daughter marries a decent man and I've done something smart with my estate planning. He laughed at that. We made an appointment for the following Tuesday. That meeting with Barry changed everything, though I wouldn't know that for another 18 months. What Barry suggested was simple. We put the house and the property into an irrevocable trust, given the assessed value, just under $800,000 by then. And the fact that I was approaching retirement age, it made straightforward estate planning sense. The trust named Madeleine as the sole beneficiary, with specific conditions. No third party could access, encumber, transfer, or sell the property without a formal process involving the trust's executor, Barry himself, and a minimum 60-day review period. Any attempt to transfer the property outside of the trust's terms would be legally null. We filed everything properly with the Ontario Land Registry. It took 3 weeks to complete. I never told Madeleine. I want to be clear about something. I didn't distrust my daughter. I trusted her completely. What I didn't trust was what love can do to a person's judgment, especially new love, especially when someone has worked very hard to make themselves look trustworthy. Madeleine had lost her mother young. She wanted a family. I understood that more than she knew. I just wanted to make sure that whatever happened, she had something solid underneath her. The engagement was announced at Christmas. Slade gave her a ring at her aunt's place in Barrie, in front of the whole family, and everyone cried and congratulated them, and I hugged my daughter and told her I was happy for her, because I was. She was radiant. Whatever Slade was, she loved him. Over the next several months, Slade got more comfortable around me. That's when I started seeing more. He'd make comments, casual ones, just thrown out, about the estate and how a place like this needed updating to really unlock its value. He asked once whether I'd considered a reverse mortgage. He mentioned, more than once, that retirement homes in northern Ontario had gotten surprisingly good in recent years. Said a buddy of his had moved his father into one near Huntsville, and the old man had really thrived. I never took the bait. I'd just say, I'm comfortable where I am, and change the subject. The wedding was in August. Beautiful day. Ceremony at a little church outside of Sudbury that Patricia and I had attended for years. Madeleine looked exactly like her mother did in our wedding photos. The same way of tilting her head when she smiled. And I spent most of the ceremony trying not to fall apart in the front pew. Slade's side of the church was smaller than I expected. A few friends from Toronto, his mother, a cousin. Nobody from what he'd called his business network, which I found odd given how much he talked about it. After the reception, after the drive to the airport and the goodbyes, I went home to that quiet house and sat on the porch for a long time. I thought about Patricia, I thought about Madeleine, and I thought about what I knew was coming. It came on a Thursday afternoon in October. 6 weeks after the wedding, I heard a car in the driveway and looked out the kitchen window. Slade's BMW, and beside it a silver Hyundai I didn't recognize. 2 men came to the door, Slade and another man in a dark jacket carrying a leather satchel. Slade had a look on his face I hadn't seen before, a kind of settled certainty, like he'd won something and was there to collect. I opened the door before they knocked. Slade said, "Eugene, this is Philip. He's a notary public. We need to talk." I said, "Come in." We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd had that first dinner with Slade, where I'd watched him look around the room. Philip opened his satchel and laid out several documents. I didn't reach for them yet. Slade said, "I want to be straight with you. We've found a buyer for the property. Serious buyer, cash offer, above market, $860,000. We've already agreed to terms." He paused. "The paperwork is here for you to sign the transfer. Given your age and everything, Madeleine and I have also arranged a place for you at Birchwood Gardens in Lively. It's a great facility. You'll have your own room, meals included. You'll be well taken care of." He slid one of the documents across the table toward me. I looked at it. It had my name on it. It purported to authorize the sale of the property and the transfer of title. And at the bottom there was a signature that was supposed to be mine, signed, according to the document, 3 weeks earlier. I had never signed that document. I looked up at Slade. He was watching me with that settled expression. Philip was uncapping a pen. I said, "Slade, whose signature is that?" He said, "Yours. You signed it at the pre-meeting with the agent." I said, "I was never at a pre-meeting with any agent." A small shift in his jaw. "Eugene, I think you might be misremembering." I said, "I don't misremember my own signature, and I certainly don't misremember selling my home." He leaned forward. His voice dropped, not threatening exactly, but firm in a way that told me he'd rehearsed this. He said, "Eugene, the sale is essentially done. The offer is accepted. The buyer has already arranged financing. Fighting this will cost you money you don't have, and at your age, this is the right move. Birchwood is a beautiful place. Madeleine thinks this is the best thing for everyone." That hit me, not because I believed it, but because I didn't know yet whether it was true, whether my daughter had been told something, whether she thought this was her idea. I sat with that for a moment. Then I said, "That's interesting, because I think there are some people who'd find this whole situation very interesting as well." I reached into the drawer beside me. I'd put it there that morning, when I saw the forecast and decided today was probably the day, and I slid my own folder across the table. Slade looked at it without touching it. "What's that?" I said. "That's a copy of the irrevocable trust that's been registered on this property for the past 19 months. The house, the land, the outbuildings, all of it has been in trust since before you and Madeleine started talking about getting serious. That document you've got there?" I nodded at his forged paperwork. "It's not worth the ink on it. You can't sell what I no longer have the sole authority to transfer." The notary, Philip, had gone very still. He picked up the document Slade had brought and read something on it quietly. Then he set it down and looked at Slade with an expression that told me Philip had not known about any of this. Slade's face had changed. The certainty was gone. He said, That's not possible. The property records reflect the trust, I said. They have for 19 months. Barry Finch is the executor. He's a retired property lawyer, and he's been CC'd on everything I'm looking at right now. I tapped the folder, including the original RCMP correspondence I filed this morning. The RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. I'd driven to the detachment on Paris Street first thing that morning and filed a report. Document forgery, attempted fraud, attempted fraudulent transfer of real property. The officer had been thorough and kind and had told me to expect a follow-up call within 48 hours. I'd handed them a copy of the forged signature alongside a certified copy of the real trust documents. Slade stood up. His chair scraped back hard. He said, "You're making a mistake." I said, "I don't think I am." He said something else, something about lawyers, about making my life difficult. But his voice had lost its foundation. He sounded like a man trying to bluff with cards he'd already shown. Philip excused himself quietly, leaving Slade's documents on the table. I watched Slade walk out the front door to his BMW. He sat in it for almost 10 minutes before he drove away. I put the kettle on. That evening, I called Madeleine. I want to tell you that she knew nothing. I want to tell you that because it's the truth, and because for a few hours I wasn't completely sure. When I reached her, she was at their apartment in Toronto. She heard my voice and she said, "Dad, what's wrong?" And the moment I started explaining, she started crying. Not the kind of crying that comes with guilt, the kind that comes with horror. She hadn't been told about any meeting with an agent. She hadn't been told about any buyer. She hadn't agreed to anything. What she had been told, what Slade had apparently told her several weeks earlier, was that I had mentioned to him privately that I was thinking of simplifying things and moving closer to the city, and that she shouldn't say anything because I wanted it to be my idea to bring it up. He'd framed it as a kindness, a surprise, something to look forward to. She had believed him. Of course she had. She was his wife, and she'd had no reason yet to be anything else. When she understood what he had actually tried to do, when I walked her through the forged document, the notary, the sale he'd tried to pass off as done, she went silent for a long time. Then she said, "Dad, I'm so sorry." I said, "You don't have anything to be sorry for." She said, "I should have called you. When he told me, I should have called you right away." I said, "Madeleine, you trusted your husband. That's not something to apologize for." She came home 3 days later. She didn't bring Slade. She sat at that kitchen table, and we talked for most of the weekend. About her mother, about the house, about what she wanted her life to look like, about what she was going to do. I didn't tell her what to do. That wasn't my place. But I told her that whatever she decided, the house was hers one day, in a trust that protected it, and that no one, not a notary, not a silver-tongued man with a leased BMW, was going to change that. The RCMP investigation moved slowly, the way these things do, but it moved. Slade was charged with fraud over $5,000 and uttering a forged document, both serious criminal code offenses. His lawyer argued that there'd been a miscommunication about the signing meeting and that Slade had been acting in what he believed were his father-in-law's best interests. The Crown didn't find that very convincing, given the forged signature, the prearranged buyer, and the notary who confirmed under oath that Slade had represented the documents as legitimately executed. Philip, to his credit, cooperated fully. He hadn't known the signatures were forged. Slade eventually pled guilty to the uttering charge. Received a conditional sentence, 2 years probation, and a restitution order, though there was nothing to actually pay back since the sale never went through. His name went into the system. That follows a person. The buyer, it turned out, had been a real estate investor out of North Bay who'd been brought in by a mutual acquaintance of Slade's. The investor had no knowledge of the fraud. He'd been told the sale was above board, and he walked away once the trust documents came to light. No hard feelings there. Barry and I had lunch at a place on Elgin Street a few months after everything was resolved. He ordered the bison burger, which he always did. I had the soup. We talked about the case the way you talk about something that's finished, with a kind of quiet satisfaction. He said, "You know what I keep thinking about? You called me 2 days after meeting the man." I said, "I know what I saw." He said, Most people don't act on what they see. They wait. They hope they're wrong. I looked out the window at Ramsey Lake. The ice had come in early that year, and the surface was this flat white that goes on forever. I thought about Patricia, about the porch we'd sit on in August watching the water, about Madeleine at 6 years old running down to the dock. I said, I'd been wrong before. I just didn't want to be wrong about this. Barry nodded. He understood. Madeleine and Slade's marriage didn't survive. She filed for separation in February. It was a hard winter for her, the hardest she'd had since losing her mother. But she got through it the way she gets through everything, which is quietly and completely. She moved back to Sudbury in the spring. She's working with the same nonprofit, remotely now, and she's been coming for dinner on Sundays. We've had some long conversations at that kitchen table, conversations about her mother, about trust, about what she's looking for and what she's not. She's doing well, better than well. Last September, she helped me restain the porch. We worked all morning without saying much. That's a thing about the people you're genuinely close to. You don't always need to fill the silence. Around noon, she set her brush down and looked at the lake and said, Dad, did you know? When you did the trust thing, did you actually know he was going to try something? I thought about that. The honest answer was, I didn't know. I suspected. I saw the look in his eyes the first night at dinner, and I recognized something in it that I didn't have a name for yet. But I didn't know. I said, I just knew I wasn't willing to bet the house on being wrong. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Mom would have liked that answer. I picked my brush back up. We finished the porch by mid-afternoon, and I made coffee, and we sat out there until the sun started dropping over the lake. The water turned orange and then deep blue, and the birches along the shoreline went still, and we just sat there together in my house. The house I built, the house her mother loved, the house that was safe, and it was enough. It was more than enough. Some things are worth protecting before anyone tries to take them.